Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at onpurposely.com.
Before we jump into today's episode as part of our special series on mental health and mental wellness, I have a favor to ask you, something I really could use your help with. We are putting together a special episode, it's going to be coming up soon, with our top listener questions. And I want to hear from you. Would you please send in your questions for me, whether it has to do with parenting, with mental health and wellness, with marriage, with your faith walk, with work, whatever it is. We want to hear from you. And if you would send those questions to comments@allmomdoes.com. That's comments@allmomdoes.com. We're gathering up those questions over the next few weeks, and then we're going to have a special episode just for you. Now for today, we continue our special series on mental health and mental wellness here on the All Mom Does podcast. So let's jump in to today's episode. I'm excited today to welcome back to the show Kari Kampakis. She was with us a few episodes ago, back on episode 136. I'll ask Rebecca to put that in the show notes so you can check it out, talking about daughters. But today, as part of our series on mental health and wellness, Kari's come back for us to be able to talk about a topic that is near and dear to her heart. Kari, thanks so much for being with me today.
Oh, thanks for having me back on, Julie.
So give our listeners that little snapshot again of where you live in the world and your family and all that stuff.
Okay, I live in Birmingham, Alabama, and I'm married to Harry. Our names rhyme, Kari and Harry.
Kari and Harry.
Yep. And we have 4 daughters. Our oldest daughter is a freshman at Auburn, and then our other daughters are in 11th grade, 9th grade, and 6th grade. And then on top of that, I have written 4 books. I've written 2 books for teenage girls. And then after those books released, I released a book for moms of teenage girls. And then this new one that we're talking about is for moms ourselves.
That's so exciting. You know, I was born right up the road from Birmingham in Huntsville, Alabama. So that is kind of familiar territory in some ways. I lived there until I was about 4, and then we took off traveling the country because of my dad's career with the space shuttle. But that just still feels like home turf. I was in Birmingham for a conference a little while back, and it is interesting how those places and spaces from our early childhood still really connect. So love your part of the world. Kari, as part of this series, we've been trying to really drill down into the things that women are grappling with today. And there are things that seem to be consistent throughout. And I think we could look back at some of the things that our grandmothers, maybe great-grandmothers were dealing with and go, oh, you know what? There's kind of a commonality there. There's a place across the generations that feels familiar. And then I think there are places too that do feel a little fresh. And one of the things that I know a lot of us can be thinking about in this lane has been what it's been like for women during the pandemic and the statistics and things that we see coming out of that time and what it means in terms of the weight that women carried, the number of women who had to exit the workforce to try to navigate all of the demands that were being made. It also feels like to me in some ways, even pre-pandemic, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like to me there's just been a lot on women in general in the last couple of decades in a way that is unique, I think. And to me, part of what comes from that is there are times that I think women have been limited by what their cultural or historic role was. And we've seen some of those things go away, which has been great. But it also seems to have opened up this wide cavern of now women are sort of expected to do everything. What are some of the things that you've noticed when you talk with women and the women that you minister to that you're seeing? Do you see that kind of aligns with your experience?
Yes. And I think you raised some great points about, in a way, I think we're really the first generation of moms that are working and raising kids. I mean, my mom worked when I was growing up, but she was rare. Most moms didn't work then. And so I think, and it's interesting, even with my daughter's generation, like I was surprised by how many of her friends had these big plans for their lives already as juniors or seniors in high school. I mean, several of them want to be doctors and just dreaming big. And I was like, I don't think I knew anybody who wanted to be a doctor at our age because women were just starting to work. But it's great in the sense that it's given us a lot of options. But yes, just juggling everything. And I think motherhood has become so much more demanding. Social media doesn't help it because we get to compare ourselves to every mom who's out there. And I often think about, gosh, these poor moms with little ones that, I raised my kids for 6 or 7 years without social media. And so I wasn't constantly questioning myself or getting all my information from the internet. If I had a question, I'd go to a family member or a friend rather than getting 700 opinions on the internet. And it just simplified things. And I think now it's just so easy to feel like we're not doing enough or we're falling behind. And then with the pandemic thrown in and just all of the stress of that, I do think, and that's one reason I wrote this book, just really focusing on a mom's wellness, because I was struggling at the time, and every mom I was talking to was struggling personally. And it was interesting because my editor was wanting another parenting book. And I kept telling them, well, what I'm seeing, I feel like we need to focus on the moms because the moms are struggling and that's affecting our parenting. So that was something I really had to get across, because I think that we moms are so quick to do things to help our kids. We are so quick to invest in our relationship with our kids. But when it comes to helping ourselves, we just don't think we have the time for that. But what we realized during the pandemic, especially, is that when we're not in a good place, then it affects our parenting and we're not as strong and healthy as we need to be for our family. And I felt like that was really the crack that opened up for myself and a lot of the moms that I was talking to, is I'm not in a good place and my anxiety is affecting my child's anxiety, or, me not feeling like I'm in a healthy place is not helping me be a strong mom for my children like I want to be. And so it really forced us to take a look at ourselves and say, okay, what inner work do we need to do to better prepare ourselves to raise these children and be the moms that we want to be?
I love that you really leaned into that, because I also have a parenting book, and I'm so thankful to have had the opportunity to have written that. But it is interesting because when you get to the end of that kind of a project, you begin to realize, wow, the quality of our parenting can only rise to the quality of how well we're doing. We can have all the tools in the world, and we can have all kinds of great approaches for managing our children well and dealing with their schedules and helping them fully realize who they were designed to be. But if we are struggling, there's no way it's not going to impact our kids. No matter how much we try to shield it, no matter how much we try to distance them from what we're going through, we simply can't. What is the top thing that you're hearing from women? If you can crystallize, we've kind of got this large issue, right, of women who are stressed, overworked, trying to do all the things. Is there one thing that really bubbles to the top when you talk with women about what they're feeling when it comes to all of the burden that is on them right now?
I really feel like it's just the anxiety. And I do think that the teenagers, I think they say now 1 out of every 3 children is struggling with anxiety. And as moms, of course, we're feeling that for our children, but then we're also anxious. And, we're anxious in every season. And I talk to a lot of moms with younger kids and they are like, should I give my kid the vaccine or not? Or they just talked about a lot of the tension in their relationships, especially during the pandemic when they had a friend get married, but they were pregnant and they didn't really want to go to the wedding. They were scared of getting COVID and their friend wasn't always that understanding. And so there's so many decisions to be made and this future is so uncertain. I think it's creating a lot of anxiety. And something else I do think is creating anxiety. I think there's a mentality out there that you especially see this as the kids get older. And it's what I'm seeing a lot in this season of parenting and hearing about a lot just in different communities I go to, is that there's this mentality that there's just one track to success. And if your child, doesn't make this team, then the plan is over. Or if they don't get in this friend group, everything is ruined. And it's really just, putting all of our eggs in that one basket of that one outcome. And as we know, life is not turning out the way we all expected it to at this point. And so just the anxiety of things not going like we thought they would. And, from what I write from a Christian standpoint. So it really does open up that topic of like, okay, what's God's plan for my child or God's plan for our family or for me? I know a number of people got divorced during the pandemic. They're amazing moms and now they're doing it alone. And so their life is not looking the way that they thought it would. But just to really just be confident in that God can still work with our circumstances, no matter what is going on within our life, just to keep leaning on Him and trusting that plan, even when it's not the plan that we originally envisioned for our children or for ourselves.
Talk to me about a place that I see a lot of moms get to that I think deeply impacts their wellness, and yet it's really thorny. I have a friend who always uses the phrase, there's a lot of hair on that. It's really thorny because they're being a great mom really to their own peril. And here's what I mean by that. I have been in seasons myself. I have definitely been around women who they are so invested in their kids, meaning if their kid can get on that team or be able to go to that event or make that kind of grade, that child already may be feeling anxiety themselves because they are wanting to be able to do these things and these things are important to them. But now mom is so invested in it that she herself is a big old stress ball because she's so into it. Where is that line that we need to start thinking about as moms, that we should be invested in our kids? We should really care. But when it's our whole world, when it is everything, I think I'm finally learning, Kari, after all these kids and all these years, that when I'm that deeply invested, it actually does not help my child. I could almost argue it could hurt my child because everything becomes about them. What are you seeing with moms in that way? And how do we resist that draw, that pull that feels like good mom energy, right? but instead can be taking us to a place where it's burdening our kids too much because all of our hopes and dreams and expectations are on them.
Right. I think that's the number one thing. And I actually just wrote an article about this, but I think it boils down to where are we finding our identity? And we are living in a culture of child-centered parenting where it is that all-in parenting and we want to be the best moms we can be. But sometimes we're finding our identity so much in our children that our joy is centered on our children. And even I have friends, I think about what kind of relationship I want to have with my children as they grow up and leave home, like what will make them want to come home. And one of my therapist friends, she's like, my mom, I'm the center of her universe and I hate it because she just puts all this pressure on me to be her source of joy instead of getting her joy from another place. And she's like, I really think it preserves your relationship with your child when they're not the center of your universe, when they're very important. But a good way to illustrate this, and a psychologist friend recently told me about this, is I think it's called the circle of security. And it basically says that the goal of a parent is to be the stronger, kinder, wiser one. And so we want to be the stronger in the relationship with our child. And a good analogy for this is you imagine that, say your child is getting on the emotional roller coaster and they are getting all panicked over something. And as moms, it's hard not to get panicked alongside with them because we're seeing all the details play out. We know their lives so well. Sometimes we know too much of what's going on. And so instead of getting on that emotional roller coaster with them, we can be the one who's telling them, I'm not going to ride that ride with you, but I will be standing here at the gate with my arms wide open, waiting for you when you get off. And so I think that's really the goal as parents, is we want to be the stronger one. And we want to, of course, empathize and listen and be sensitive to what our kids are going through, but to also give them that source of security and strength and to be that one that I'm not going to get rattled. I know that everything's going to work out, even if it doesn't look like it right now. And I think our kids really crave that. And what I've realized as a mom after parenting for 20 years, I've finally come to realize this, like to be that person, I have to take care of myself. And one thing I really think that we don't do enough as moms is build our own support network and our own adult village, because we're so concerned with our child-centered parenting and helping our kids make friends and making sure they're okay, that sometimes we neglect our needs, like our needs for an adult village. And, I said, especially when you're raising teenagers, I'm like, they don't always make you feel good. They're not always going to, it's tough. It's hard to keep loving them when they're rolling their eyes or you're having a bad day or you're in a rocky season. And so I've learned it's really important for me to strengthen my relationship with my spouse and my Bible club and my friends, and just have people in my life who are building me up, who are loving me. And that way I can turn around and love my child and be strong for them, regardless of how they're acting toward me. And I think that's really what moms, we're not always doing for ourselves, is we're not finding those outside sources, or, especially leaning on our faith too, and just drawing our strength from God and, just really pursuing him and just building that relationship so that we can then turn around and love our child the way that God loves us, regardless of whether we're loving him back at the time. But it's hard. It's so hard to do it.
It is. One thing that I found that became really interesting for quite a period of time, some of my primary relationships tended to be toward the other moms who were part of my kids and their kids' shared activities. And some of those friendships are really sweet and still remain to this day. But I needed to get to a place where my friendships were not all just with the soccer moms or the dance moms or the whatever, where I had relationships outside of that, because sometimes we can stand back and go, oh, well, I do have friendships. I do have a village, Kari. I've got it. And then if we stop and think about it, we're like, but when that kid finishes up that whole soccer club and goes on to college, like, that's it. So who do you have who is not just aligned and attached through those activities, through school, through all that kind of stuff? For a long time, we've been pushing back against this phrase. We've been reminding ourselves, we've been telling our sisters, hey, let's not say I'm just a mom. Like that's such a difficult phrase because you're diminishing what you do, and what you do is so important. And so we've been working on purging that from our language. I love in this new book that you have entitled it More Than a Mom. And I can almost imagine there are some moms who are going to have a sense of, ooh, well, but my children are my world, and my call is to be with these kids, and more than a mom. I mean, am I going to slide into some kind of self-involved, like, what is that going to mean? And so talk to me about those places when we feel a sense of almost guilt. Like, well, can I be more than a mom? Like, I don't know. Am I supposed to be that? I mean, I'm only going to have these kids in my house a short amount of time. All the things that we tell ourselves. When we start feeling that maybe we aren't ready, or how do we feel about being more than a mom? How do we get over that sense? Because I think there are a lot of places in our culture today, and frankly within our faith communities, that sometimes it's like, okay, well, it's fine if you don't say you're just a mom, but I don't know if I'm ready for you to say you're more than a mom.
Right. No, I agree completely. And I think that I learned that lesson the hard way, especially having 4 daughters close together. I was like, I am all in. And so I just felt like if I met somebody, that was my introduction. I'm a mom of 4 girls. Like, that is my identity. That's who I am. But what I've seen as my girls grow up is that our kids grow up and they get a life of their own. And what happened as my girls became teenagers is I was still kind of like centering my life around them, and they didn't want that. I mean, they still want to be engaged, but they didn't want to be the center of my attention. And it was starting to hurt our relationship. And I think that's what happens, with moms when we don't see ourselves as just more than a mom. When our children become more self-sufficient as they go to college and our relationship changes, and we're still there to mentor them, coach them, cheer them on, guide them, but they don't need us in the same way. It's more of an adult relationship that if we do keep centering our life around them and making them the center of our source, or the center of our joy, and, our everything, that sometimes it can push them away. And so what I found is, as I started investing in other things, like still making my family a priority, like they're still my priority. I still feel like my family will always be my biggest purpose in life. Like nothing will ever compare to raising children or compare to my calling as a mom. That definitely has given me the greatest joy in my life. But also having other things that just, other things in my life that don't relate to my children, just work that I'm passionate about, and friendships, strong friendships. And what I also realize I'm doing, I'm modeling this for my children. And, especially you realize that as your children become teenagers, they're always going to remember what they witness in our life right now. And I was so aware of that, especially my daughter's final years at home before she went to college. And I was like, I need to take care of my health. I need to keep my doctor appointments because I want her to keep her doctor appointments. If she's not feeling well, I want her to go get it checked out. I don't want her to let it slide. And I wanted her to see me having strong friendships. I was like, I want my daughter to have strong friendships as she grows up and becomes an adult. And I've got a model in my life what I want to see in her life. And, and this all kind of coincided too with my mom passing away. And, when you lose a parent, you just have this flood of memories. And I was so surprised that so many of my memories with my mom were from my teenage years and my early 20s. Like just so many, they're just very vivid in my mind. And I think it's because I was at that age where you actually remember things. And I also was at the age where I was still spending a lot of time with my mom. And so I think as moms, sometimes motherhood is motivating. We might not do these things for ourselves. Well, I don't need friends, or I don't need a life beyond my children. But actually, it's good for our children to see us doing that. And I have found that it has strengthened my relationship with my children. That way, when my daughter's at college, when she's living her life, I've got things that keep me busy at home, things that I'm passionate about. But yet I'm so excited when I get to see her. And I'm not making her like the center and the source of all my joy, because I'm finding that as a child of God and just in these other things that I'm doing. So for me, the faith component really comes into play here. The whole premise of this book is that we are more than just a mom. That is a huge identity and a part of our identity and a huge role in our life. But our greatest identity is that we are children of God. And that is our number one identity. And just really seeing ourselves as a child of God. And knowing that we still have a purpose even as our children leave home. I think that's one of the biggest misconception that women have. And I hear from a lot of moms who are in that season, like, I'm really struggling. I don't have a job or anything I've done besides motherhood. And they're feeling lost at age 50 or 55. But in my opinion, I'm like, you've got the greatest tool to offer the world. You have got a mother's heart, and you can take that into any calling, any job. I mean, there's so many needs in our world that call for a mother's heart. And you can't teach that to a 20-year-old. You can't teach that in a training seminar. And I think it's just really helping women see that we can have so many different purposes in life. Nothing may compare to being our calling as a mom. Nothing may give us that same kind of joy, but we can still, add good to the world and do things with our lives and our talents as our children are living their lives too.
$32.8 million Americans under the age of 65 are uninsured. 32.8 million. And a lot of those people don't have insurance because of the cost, or they don't have access to it through their work, or because they're self-employed and haven't found an affordable option. I found a great solution I want you to know about. One that is helping so many families have top quality healthcare offerings at an affordable price. Altrua Health Share is a membership of like-minded, health-conscious people. The Altrua Health Share membership shares in each other's medical costs and has features like pooled office visits, telemedicine, telecounseling, prescription discounts, and more. If you want to see how much you can save on your healthcare costs, go to familyhealth.family. I think you'll find, just like I did, that Altrua Health Share can give you the peace of mind you're looking for when it comes to taking care of your family's healthcare needs. So go to familyhealth.family and let them know that I sent you. Altrua Health Share, where we believe in caring for one another. It's funny that you bring up this idea of modeling for our kids what adult womanhood looks like. You're so right. My mom has recently passed as well. And you're right. I mean, it is the memories from those teenage years and early 20s. And I think I was watching more closely. There's something assumptive, I think, when you're younger about your parent being alongside you. There's sort of this mythical character that takes care of you. And you're not necessarily superimposing that upon who do I want to be? What's the kind of woman I want to be? And I do remember several things much more clearly from those years of my teenagehood into my early 20s with my mom. You're so right. It's interesting to me too, because I was reflecting as you were talking about that. When I was a kid growing up in Southern California, my dad's office was actually part of, this sounds strange, but in the town in which we were living, which was all aerospace industry, there were offices that were leased to different people in a hotel. That sounds weird, I know, but there was a bottom floor that were office suites, and they looked out over the hotel swimming pool. And so as kids, my brothers and I, my mom would take us, and we were able to go swim at this pool. And I knew my dad's office was just on the other side of that window. And every now and then, Kari, every now and then, we'd get to slip in and say hi to him in his office. And it was this moment as a kid of going, my dad has this whole life that exists. I know he loves us and he's home in the evenings and we're having dinner and we're doing all the things, but he has this whole world that is this full life. And in many ways, I assumptively thought that I knew my mom's whole world because she was with us all the time. And so her sitting at the table working on taxes, that was her desk, that was her office, that's where we ate dinner. You know, I mean, it was this place where I felt like I had more of a window into her daily world, but I also kind of took it for granted that we were the center of it. So in that way, I feel like when we're talking about being more than a mom, that mentality of what is our quote unquote office where our kids know there is this world, there's this container for things that they are loved and adored, but aren't all about them
Yes.
that we're doing, and how powerful that felt even to observe that as a child. What are some top things we can do? Because this term self-care, Kari, you and I both know it's super loaded, because there are times where like, it's not just about getting a pedicure. And I'm like, sometimes it is 1,000% about getting a pedicure. I'm sorry, it just is.
Right.
But how do you unpack that idea? And how do we make sure these are things that are really going toward our wholeness, our health, particularly if we are concerned we're going to slip into a self-indulgence, or maybe we have, because honestly, Kari, I have observed some situations. I am not trying to mom judge at all. But when we face difficult times, if the teenage girl is being difficult in our household, it's human to want to escape and avoid that. If things are tough in the marriage, if we're in a season of parenting that's really challenging, it's normal to want to put distance between ourselves and that. And even that's not really self-care, and it can lapse over into just avoidant behavior. So how do you approach this whole idea on self-care and putting the checks and balances in place that make it what it's really supposed to be?
Yes, that is a great question. And I actually talk about that in the book that, self-care has a lot of negative connotations. And I
Yeah.
think that we're just a country of extremes or just a world of extremes. And sometimes we have a hard time finding moderation in things. And so it seems today in society, we either have a mentality of self-worship or a mentality of self-neglect. Like, I don't need to be taking time for myself. My family's my everything. But once you've been parenting 10 or 20 years, I mean, that mentality will catch up with you. And I'm at the age now where I know people who have a diagnosis that they're like, I just didn't go to the doctor for 5 years. If I had gone 5 years ago, I would not be at this point right now. And so, self-neglect does catch up with us at some point. But as you said, I think there's also that common mentality of self-worship. And self-care is such a big buzzword right now. We could do anything in the name of self-care. We could, go on a cruise every month. That we could leave our family in the name of self-care. I mean, it can take definitely a negative and even a toxic turn. So again, I think it all goes back to the faith component and really thinking about like what is feeding our soul. And maybe it should be more about like soul care and really what's helping us grow closer to God, what's helping us be the role model that we want our children to see. And like I said, with my girls growing up, that's something I really think about a lot. And, I look at it as, okay, I hope to live another 40 or 50 years, God willing, who knows? But I was like, that I got to take care of myself to make it that long. Sometimes I feel like I'm going down right now. You already feel the ailments of age. But I've also noticed too that, teenagers are naturally self-centered. I think we live in a little bit of a narcissistic society just with social media and all that. And so it's so important for our kids to see that they're not the center of the universe. And you really see that as they get older, that it hurts them in their relationships. It hurts them in everything when they have that mentality and when they don't understand the importance of giving back and using their gifts to help others and just seeing that they're just a small part of the picture. They're very important, but they're put on this earth to serve others and to show God's love to others and to use their talents and gifts for a higher purpose. And it's going to make them happier. It's going to lead to a more meaningful life. And I think that as we show that as moms, that, we're taking care of ourselves, but it's basically so that we have more to give to others, so that we have more energy and talents to pour out to others. That's really the sole purpose, is that we're trying to keep ourselves in a good place so that we can keep serving others to the best of our ability. And just seeing that, I guess, that big picture. And, it is neat. Even my oldest daughter's in college, and I think she might go into counseling or psychology now, but she doesn't know exactly what she wants to do, but she knows she wants to help people. And she's kind of seen some of what I've done through some of my writing, and it's influenced her in having that bigger picture of wanting to help people and see a tangible result of that. And so I do think it's important we could do this as stay-at-home moms, even if that's our job. I mean, I know so many women with these beautiful talents, and they do so much. They are the unsung heroes. I mean, they will make an event beautiful. They do the flowers, or they plan the party, or they're the one going and sitting with a friend who's having a hard time. And I know a mom in my community that there was a mother with MS years ago, and she couldn't drive. And so several moms would each take a different day each week, and they would take her to Bible studies or to the grocery store. Like that was their thing that they would do for their friend. And that's the kind of thing you don't see on social media, but it's so important. And I think as our children see us investing in people beyond our own family, it's planting those seeds that hopefully they will think beyond themselves one day too, and they'll think beyond their own family. And yes, like I said, keep your family priority, but also just see that bigger picture that the world has so many needs out there. So many people are struggling and suffering, and we can help them. And it's going to lead to a richer life if we do.
Kari, talk to me about the woman who kind of comes up to the surface and says, wow, I have dedicated my whole world to my kids, my husband, and now I'm sort of waking up afresh into realizing that I'm tired. I'm resentful. I spent all these years, these people have all spun out to do their own lives and kind of left me here. Because for some women, making that transition from just a mom to more than a mom can leave them with a lot of resentments and angers and feelings that they missed opportunities when they were younger, and that isn't appreciated with the people that they did it for. How does that mom move into a place of making peace with that? Because the reality is, you and I both know there's just time you can't get back. And you're going to be making choices. I know a lot of women who probably could have been here in a career if they had, you know, been a little more strategic in how they handed off certain components of their household responsibilities. I know women who resent that they didn't get those years with their kids because they were in a different kind of position. And so as women are moving through those seasons and realizing that they're loving their motherhood, but it is not the thing that can always remain center, what does that woman do with those feelings that are not a sense of, oh, those sweet years we did that? They're looking back and going, man, I missed a lot of life, or I was undermined, or I wasn't appreciated, and now here I am. What does she do with that?
Oh, that is such a good point and a great question. I think it's important for all of us is to just to remember that we can't change the past and we can't change our decisions. And for the mom who feels like she poured and poured into her family and invested and it went unappreciated, but to also find peace in saying, you know what, I'm very proud of that. And that, I loved my people well. And I think that's something we don't give ourselves enough credit for. And yes, I did sacrifice this opportunity, but I invested it in my children and my family. And I'm thankful that I had that opportunity and that I did that. I think there's that you can look at it that way. But I do also think that that's probably a journey of having to get through that resentment and that bitterness. And like I said, our kids, I don't think our kids can really, they can never probably fully appreciate us like maybe an adult would, but also until they become a parent, which might be what,
Themselves, yeah.
20 years from now of like,
Yeah.
I cannot wait for the day when you can
Yeah.
finally understand. But like what I've really learned as a mom is I have the sweetest husband in the world. I mean, he is so understanding, but as my kids have gotten older, I've realized I've needed my mom friends even more. And it's funny with your mom friends. I feel like you need them when your kids are little, when you're just surviving and just help me get through the afternoon. And whoever's baby needs a diaper change, you just grab that baby and change them. And then I think with parenting, we sometimes go through that sweet spot where we feel like, okay, this is my jam, my family. We're cruising here. This is a good spot before the teenage years. I feel like now looking back, it's kind of when you catch your breath for what's to come.
Yeah.
And then you go through the teenage years and you're launching kids and you're looking at an unknown future. And it's hard. I mean, and everybody's life is hard in different ways, but the teenagers are having bigger problems and bigger struggles. We don't always have quick answers or solutions. You might be struggling in that relationship. And I really think it's so important for moms to have mom friends. And, especially if you are doing it alone, just those mom friends that get your heart and that know, oh my gosh, I know your child didn't appreciate that birthday party, but I know you spent 3 hours planning that. Or I know that you blew up all those balloons by yourself. That balloon arch took you 5 hours to make. Something that our kids wouldn't even appreciate or think twice about. Having those mom friends just can help, like I said, have that love in your life and that appreciation that you might not be getting at home. And again, I think it's really important just to find that village. And it's going to look different for everybody. It might be your hairdresser. It might be your therapist. It might be your grandmother. I hope I'm making a mental note to myself as my girls grow up. Like, I want to be a cheerleader for them. I want to be the kind of mother who's
Right.
telling them, you're an amazing mom. They might not be hearing that from anybody else, but what can I do to help you? You're doing an amazing job. I know your kids don't appreciate it yet, but one day they will. But I think it's so important for women to hear those voices in their lives and to do that for each other. And I really think that's one thing that's really hurt us as a society is that we don't support other moms like that. We're all just so focused on keeping our own head above water. A lot of times thinking about how are other people making me feel? What's everybody doing for me? Without really thinking that, what, I have the power to go create that mom community where we are lifting each other up, where we are speaking life and truth to each other. And especially for our single mom friends or somebody that's going through a hard time, I've always found that when I'm going through a hard time, usually I have people around me who are strong and they can be strong for me. And so when I feel like I'm in a strong place, I try to be that strong friend for others and just know that God didn't create us to do this alone, to work through those things. And like I said, as we do create that adult village, as we find other things that give us joy and just leaning into our faith and finding strength from God and just ultimately, finding our joy in Christ and just our relationship with Him. And just knowing that no matter what goes on in our life, that we still have that joy, that we still have that hope of heaven, and that any pain we face in this world is temporary, and there's so much more to come. But I think just, as we get to that point, growing in our faith, it allows us to turn around, like I said, and just love our children and our family like God loves us, without those strings attached, without expectations. And as we all know, the people who love like that, who can love others without expectation in return, they're the ones that we want to be around. They're the ones that our grown kids are going to want to be around. And so I'm often thinking about, how can I become that person? My dad's a great example. I mean, he's a love ninja he loves seeing us, but there's nothing expected in return. He's just a strong person. He's got a very strong faith, and we love being with him for that purpose. But it's hard because as moms, like you said, we're constantly pouring out, and a lot of what we do is unappreciated. But I think it's just knowing that, having those adult friends who get it, and then also having our faith, and knowing that no matter what's happening in our life, just remembering how loved we are by God, remembering our identity as a child of God, and just really finding strength and rest in that.
So many great points, so much wisdom. And I know there's even so much more packed into your newest book, Just a Mom. Kari, more than a mom. I did it again, Kari. See, it's so part of our culture. More than a mom, not just a mom. Kari, thank you so much for returning to the podcast. Your first episode, listeners just so appreciated. I so appreciate it. And it's great to be able to have you back. Where can listeners find out more about you, connect with you on social media, all the places?
Okay, I'm most active on Instagram and Facebook under Kari Kampakis. And then the book is available everywhere books are sold.
Excellent. All right. Well, Kari, thank you so much for being part of this special series on mental health and wellness for moms. I just can't thank you enough for being here.
Thanks for having me, Julie.
Check out our show notes, because that's where you're going to find all the great links and extra resources. Rebecca puts those together every week. Hey, before you finish up today, would love your help with this. We are putting together, first time we've done it this way, we're putting together an episode with your questions. It can be any questions you have specific to this series, but it can also be just anything, just general. Faith issues, mom stuff, wife stuff, whatever. Just send it our way. If you would send those to comments@allmomdoes.com. That's comments@allmomdoes.com. I would so appreciate it. We're really excited to put together a special episode for you, and we want to hear from you. Join us on the socials. Go to allmomdoes.com for more posts and resources and great tools. I love to hear from you too. I'm Julie Lyles Carr in all the places on the social medias, and I'll see you next time on the All Mom Does podcast.